Great first hour, all kinds of varieties of feisty commentary, just the way we like it. And I'm sure we're going to get some feisty commentary now from Premier Kathy Dunderdale. Premier Dunderdale, you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bill. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Now, I hope you don't think I'm trying to get an opportunity to run for the PCs in the next election away. I'm saying that, your party and you are really starting to come into your own.
Oh, well, I appreciate that very much. We work hard.
Yeah, you do.
And so it's nice when you hear something positive. That's a good thing.
Yeah, well, I don't mean to preempt your time here, but my take, having been in politics myself, is it's very easy for a party to go into sort of the midterm slump or blues or doldrums. Wait for the next 2 years to pass before you start passing judgment, would be my advice to the electorate.
Yes, and, my advice to my cabinet and caucus is stay the course.
Yeah.
We have a plan. We've laid that plan out before the people of the province. What we need to do is stay calm and focus and continue to work the plan.
Right.
It's a good plan, and have confidence in the people of the province, and I absolutely do.
Well, that's tremendous. Do you intend to run as leader in the next election, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no question in your mind about retiring or anything like that?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I'll put myself before the electorate in 2015 when the time comes. At this point in the mandate, we're halfway through our term. I'm very pleased with where we are. Right? The pieces of work that we have done over the last 2 years have been very, very significant for the long-term economic and social health of the province. I think people are starting to see that now. It's important to be able to make difficult decisions, and as I say to people, that's why you have a 4-year term. Because if this were all about popularity and getting re-elected, and those things are important if you're going to actualize your vision for the people of the province, but you have to be able to have room to do what you believe is absolutely right so that you can prosper in the long term. And we've done that, but I think in terms of when people look at all of the report cards we get on economic and social development in the province, how we're managing our debt, how we're growing our economy, how we're making our future more sustainable. So this is just not a blip in our history of that we continue to have and have more as we go forward. And I think people are finally starting to see that plan and, how we build on layer after layer. And in fact, that's why I called you today, because since the last time we talked, there's been several important developments in the province.
Yeah.
The West White Rose development, and what that means to the Treasury is really important. We've had a decision by the partners in West White Rose to use a new technology to the province, not new in the world, but new technology to this province to extract every ounce of oil out of that project that they can. And that's always very important to us as a government, that whatever is there in terms of the resource, that you maximize that value for the people of the province. So we need to get as much out as we can. So this is a new technology that's going to allow more oil to be extracted from the field. It will have a significant impact on the Treasury of the province, more revenue coming in royalties. But, the most significant bonus, I think, is what we're able to do in the expansion of our industrial yards in the province, because we're developing a new yard in Argentia. We're going to create significant work over 12,000 person years of employment there, and then 240 permanent jobs on the platform after it's built. We've got a permanent piece of infrastructure there that can be used not only for the offshore, and I understand that Husky and Suncor are already talking about building a second wellhead platform there, but others in the marine industry can use it as well. And I just wanted to take the opportunity as well to congratulate the Argentia Management Authority and the regional councils down there. They have been working away on development opportunities for that region of the province for over 15 years. When I was minister, I met with them regularly. And because of their vision and their commitment, and often we didn't know where the opportunity was going to be, even if there was going to be an opportunity. But when an opportunity did come, because of their good work and keeping all of this top of mind, we were able to say very early on, Argentia is the place we need to do this. So, that's a really good news story and one we're really proud of, and you're going to see some really wonderful things happen in that region of the province as our offshore matures.
Yeah.
The second big piece, of course, is the CETA piece.
Yes.
And I'm thrilled about that.
Sorry, just before you get into the CETA content itself or anything you want to say about it, some people are asking me, why did Premier Cathy Dunderdale hightail it back from Brazil, where she was on a trade mission, to come rushing back here regarding the CETA announcement? What was she trying to achieve there? And I must confess, I didn't have an answer.
Well, two things. This has been a hard negotiation for us, and anybody who's been paying attention to our CETA negotiations over the last year, there's been a number of flare-ups, several of them that went public, in terms of what we absolutely required for the people of the province before we were going to sign on to a CETA agreement. And a number of important things, but none any more important than the fishery. And twice in this process, as I've said publicly before, in fact, we walked away from the loan guarantee for Muskrat Falls because we were being asked, if we give you the loan guarantee, then you have to give us this on fishery. Right. And we were saying, not on your life. You keep your loan guarantee because we're not going there. There's no quid pro quo here. But in terms of what the final product was going to be, we didn't know until the announcement was made.
Okay, so you wanted to ensure that everything was in place as you understood it to be. Is that
absolutely?
Okay, gotcha.
Absolutely. So we didn't know exactly what the final agreement was going to look like. We thought it was going to be fine. They had signed off and indicated to us that they were going to take what we had put forward and try and negotiate that with the European Union, and put their best efforts into a successful negotiation that would be good for them and good for us. But whether they had been able to achieve that wasn't clear until the announcement was made. And so I needed to be here in case we hadn't achieved all the outcomes that we expected. And I was happy that we had. And there are several other pieces to it that we haven't spoken publicly about yet. I will do that over the next week, but it was extremely important that I do that from here and be able to go to Ottawa if necessary and not try to be conducting this dialogue if it was necessary from a foreign country.
Well, Anna, that's really interesting what you described there. We've seen another party, or one of the parties in opposition to yourself, sort of do a kamikaze act over lack of process, to my mind. I mean, the lack of leadership process in the constitution of the party caused all of this. And now here's a process. You rushed back from an important trade mission in Brazil because you didn't really know, you had a good idea, but you didn't really know what was in a big trade agreement between Canada and the EU. Do you think it's right and proper that you, as the premier of an important province, dealing with the EU, should have been kept in the dark and you had to find out after the fact, so to speak?
Well, it's a process that we had to work within. In my understanding, this is the first time in this country that provinces have been engaged in the negotiation of a free trade agreement to the degree that we have been. So that's a new process, and, you work it along, you get more and more and more engaged, and that's a good thing. The country had to have the freedom to negotiate. At the end of the day, the decision was ours as to whether or not we signed on to the free trade agreement. So we did have that autonomy, but this is clearly at this point in time within the purview of the federal government, and they certainly were more inclusive in this process, is my understanding, than they have ever been in the past. But it's this funny federation we've got of Canada, and how it works and who has authority where and so on, and the rubs you can come up against. It's why we were so absolutely adamant that we protect the interests of the people of this province in this. And, when people were asking us to sign off things in the fishery that were important to the EU and was going to smooth the way for perhaps beef and pork or logs or whatever else was important to the rest of Canada, it was important that somebody be here to say absolutely not. No. That may have been the practice in the past. That will be the practice no more. And we're prepared to negotiate. We're prepared to talk to you, and there are very, very important things that we need here. A lot of the initiatives that have taken place in the fishery here over the last 50 years. Well, somebody referred to it last week to me as palliative care. And we need to move away from that. This is the first step in that, in this piece, opening up this market, having those tariffs removed from our really important lines of fish is extremely important to the industry. It will have an immediate impact of about $25 million a year to the industry, can grow up to 100 now, and creates an opportunity for us to do other things in the fishery now that are positive, that are proactive, and we can start to grow again this important economic tool we have here in the province.
Was there ever any consideration given to a matter that's considered no doubt minor federally and across the rest of Canada, important here, economically, historically, sociologically, the seal fishery, part of the fishery, the seal harvest? Was there ever any consideration given to getting rid of the ban on the importation of seal products by the EU as part of an overall free trade agreement between us and them?
Everything gets tested in the talking and the negotiations, and there are some places that you don't keep beating on the wall because you're not going to be successful, and you have to move on to other pieces. The seal fishery remains extremely important to us. I mean, culturally as much as economically, and it's something in this province that people are passionate about because it's about our rights as a civilized people to use the resources we have to sustain ourselves. That's what it's about. And, it's not any different than beavers in Holland or geese in France or boars in Germany, and that's the hypocrisy of this great debate in Europe. I mean, it was one of the important pieces we did in China because they have a view that is similar to ours. And, I noticed in the paper they noted the gifts we brought to China, and I'm happy to report that they were sealskin products. And
did anyone turn up their
not at all. They were absolutely, the beautiful mitts and mittens and so on, and these were the official gifts we brought as culturally expected, when you do these pieces of work and so on. And, they take the same view as we do in a country that's as heavily populated as China. They use every resource that's available to them to sustain themselves as a people. That we do that in a civilized way is where the discussion ought to be. And, we're proud of the way that we execute our seal fishery here in this province.
Absolutely. Premier Dunderdale, one final question from me on another topic, but it's a topic that's kind of growing in my own mind, I'm sure, and in other people's minds as well. As criticism continues on the Muskrat Falls, do you honestly, as Premier, ever feel the least bit nervous or jittery over the direction of Muskrat Falls and any elements of it, that, we may be getting ourselves into a gigantic cash crunch or financial disaster down the road if things don't go according to plan regarding the Muskrat Falls? Because that's the kind of alarmist scenario that's constantly being painted out there.
No question. But we have to really Mr. Rowan, I say this in the most respectful way. We have to look at who's raising the alarm and what information are they basing it on. Yes, I worry about Muskrat Falls. It's an $8 billion project. It is one of the biggest undertakings that any government has ever done in the history of our province. It is extremely important that we get it right, that we do it right. That is why I remember, for example, in our last conversation, you talked to me about water management, and you said, you felt that sometimes the way we answer our questions are a bit cavalier. So somebody raises an issue of water management, and we say, no, we've looked into that, and you say you don't sound like you give it enough consideration. Let me use that one example. When we came to government in 2003, it was part of our party platform to see to the development of the Lower Churchill. And when we started to look deeply into it, we realized that in a previous attempt to develop the Lower Churchill, the Newfoundland Labrador government had made changes to the shareholders agreement of CFLCO and had given Hydro-Quebec a veto over development on the Churchill River. So any development that took place after that, if it didn't suit Hydro-Quebec, they could veto the development. I'm sure that amendment was made knowing or believing that the project was going to go ahead and be developed, and Gull and Muskrat will be developed, and it wouldn't be an issue anymore. But it fell through. It fell through because Aboriginals hadn't been consulted or agreed to the development. But nobody went back and changed the shareholders agreement. So Hydro-Quebec held its veto. When I sometimes wonder now, when I think about the last deal that was negotiated under the federal government, under the provincial Liberals, and we believe that the deal was really bad, weighted in the favour of Hydro-Quebec. Was that the reason it was so lopsided? Because if they didn't get what they wanted, they could veto the project. So we understood right from the beginning, before we could get into the development of the Lower Churchill, we had to change that. So we brought in water management legislation into the House of Assembly. And I was minister who brought it in at the time. I can tell you there were law firms across this country who were tuned into the House of Assembly that day. I was the only minister who spoke to the legislation on our side, because it had to be clearly understood by Hydro-Quebec, the government of Quebec, and anybody else who had an interest in the country, that we were not trying to interfere with the Upper Churchill contract, that we would always maintain our obligations to the Upper Churchill contract, but that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians had to be stewards of their own resources, including the Churchill River and every other river in the province. And that's why we were bringing in this legislation. So water management, when we did this, I think it was in 2007, when somebody raises an issue of water management, and Quebec has gone to court on water management, this is an issue that we understand inside out and upside down, have had legal opinions from, inside our province, outside our province, brought in legislation, changed the shareholders agreement as a result, and that's what it came out of. That's the kind of planning that has gone on around the development of the Churchill River. We need to get it right. We have now, we're reviewing a request for proposals on financing of the Muskrat Falls. Financial institutions across this country are vying for the right to finance Churchill Falls. They're not doing that on a weak business plan. The federal government is booking $1 billion, nearly $1 billion, on a loan guarantee. They're not doing that on a weak business plan. We have had at least 7 independent assessments of the work, the methodology, the assumptions around Churchill Falls, and they have, the Lower Churchill Muskrat Falls, they have confirmed the work that Nalcor and Amera has done. URAB has has had their own experts look at the work. And, if somebody is concerned about something, we say, there might be some legitimacy to this, then we go arm's length. We look to our own expertise first, and then we go arm's length, because it's important to provide as much comfort as we can to the people of the province, because this is such a big undertaking that, Nalcor is using its expertise, Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro, and, we're having this audited on a regular basis by a variety of independent experts. And we hit the marks every time. I mean, the credit rating for Muskrat Falls is done independently of the credit rating of the province is extremely high, came in much higher than we hoped it would be. So on every, I keep saying, if somebody has, you can remember last year, the great debate in this province was whether or not there were markets. Sure, we can't get out of Nova Scotia. They want all Muskrat Falls, and they want more besides that. Right. So, yes, there are markets, but, people argued, and they called us arrogant and willful and hostile and not prepared to listen, and, all of the criticisms that have come our way, nobody wants to talk about that anymore. Right. That, we don't even have enough power. Right. We're talking about now developing small hydro on the West Coast. We're really hopeful that our excess power is going to be used in Labrador. Then how do we fill up that pipeline? And so it creates more opportunities for the people of the province. All
right. I think you've given a distinct impression you're on top of things there, Premier, if you don't mind. Premier, before we say goodbye, delicate situation that needs to be asked about. I mean, when you heard about the problems with the NDP, the situation there, I mean, what did you feel a sense of glee that an opposition party was sort of going down in flames, or did you feel empathy, compassion for the leader or the party? What were your feelings at the time?
I make it a practice really not to comment on the inner workings of the other political parties. And I really don't want to in this case. The one thing that I will say is that they're speaking together now out of the public eye, and I think we're all very happy about that. And I wish them the very best. I truly do.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Premier Dunderdale. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Join us anytime the spirit moves you.
Thank you. Generous as always. Thank you very much.
All the very best.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. And we kept the Premier on, of course, through that break time so that she could express herself. I think is important from time to time to have the Premier talk about these, address the matters that she is criticized for especially, and to then allow people to get back and either agree or disagree with anything they have heard.